Today, we're diving into a topic that has sparked major concern across Europe and beyond: the Baltic Sea, one of the most unique and fragile bodies of water on the planet, and how Denmark's recent decision might have irreversible consequences for it. The situation is complex, and the potential environmental, economic, and geopolitical impacts are staggering. Over the next few minutes, we'll break down what's happening, why it matters, and why scientists are warning that recovery might no longer be possible. The Baltic Sea is unlike any other sea in the world. It is relatively shallow, has a slow water exchange with the North Sea, and is highly sensitive to environmental pressures. Over the past decades, it has already suffered from pollution, overfishing, and eutrophication, a process in which excessive nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, lead to massive algae blooms. These blooms deplete oxygen levels in the water, creating dead zones where marine life cannot survive. For years, international agreements and environmental measures have aimed to stabilize this delicate ecosystem. But the recent decision by Denmark threatens to tip the balance beyond repair. Denmark has approved a plan that involves expanding industrial activities in the region. While the specifics involve economic growth and energy development, environmentalists argue that these actions will accelerate pollution and disturb the natural processes that have kept the Baltic relatively stable. For decades, policies in Denmark and neighboring countries have attempted to reduce agricultural runoff and manage industrial waste. But with new infrastructure projects and regulatory relaxations, the risk of nutrient overload, chemical contamination, and habitat destruction is dramatically increasing. The Baltic Sea is already struggling with oxygen depletion. Large portions of its deeper waters are effectively dead zones, unable to support complex marine life. When additional pollutants and industrial runoff enter the sea, these dead zones expand. Oxygen depletion triggers a chain reaction. Fish populations decline, biodiversity diminishes, and the overall health of the ecosystem deteriorates. Once a tipping point is crossed, restoring balance can take decades, if not centuries. Experts argue that Denmark's decision might push the sea past this critical threshold. One major concern is the impact on the Baltic's fisheries. This sea has supported human settlements for thousands of years, providing food, employment, and cultural identity. Cod, herring, and sprat are just some of the species that rely on the fragile balance of this ecosystem. Declining oxygen levels and chemical contamination disrupt breeding grounds and feeding patterns. Fishermen have already reported smaller catches and increased instances of dead fish washing ashore. If the situation worsens, entire fishing communities may face economic collapse, and the historic connection between humans and the Baltic Sea could be permanently damaged. Marine biodiversity in the Baltic is also at risk. The sea hosts unique species adapted to its brackish waters, a mix of fresh and salt water that supports life you won't find anywhere else. From the Baltic herring to rare flatfish species, these organisms have evolved over millennia in very specific conditions. Changes in water chemistry, temperature, and oxygen levels threaten this delicate balance. Once species disappear, they cannot easily be reintroduced, and the ecological network they supported collapses. Denmark's decision, by increasing industrial pressure, accelerates this process. Another factor to consider is the broader environmental chain reaction. When the Baltic Sea suffers, it impacts the entire region. Coastal ecosystems, wetlands, and migratory bird populations all rely on the health of this sea. Dead zones produce gases like hydrogen sulfide, which can enter the atmosphere and affect air quality. Toxic algae blooms create risks for human health, affecting swimmers, local tourism, and seafood safety. Economies that depend on sustainable fisheries and clean coastal environments face severe long-term challenges. This isn't just an environmental issue, it's a socio-economic crisis waiting to unfold. Climate change compounds the problem. The Baltic Sea is warming faster than many other bodies of water in the world. Higher temperatures exacerbate oxygen depletion and make algae blooms more frequent and severe. When Denmark's policies increase nutrient runoff or disturb sediments that have accumulated pollutants for decades, the effects of warming waters are magnified. Essentially, human activity and climate change are working together to push the Baltic toward a point of no return. Research over the last 20 years has shown that recovery of the Baltic Sea is possible, but only with strict, coordinated international measures. Sweden, Germany, Poland, and other countries have implemented ambitious programs to reduce agricultural runoff, monitor industrial waste, and restore habitats. These measures have shown positive effects, with small improvements in water quality and species recovery. However, Denmark's recent decision undermines these efforts. When one major player increases pressure on the ecosystem, it can negate decades of progress. Denmark's choice is being justified by economic growth, energy security, and job creation. There are certainly arguments for infrastructure development, renewable energy projects, and industrial expansion, yet environmental experts argue that these benefits may be short-term while the ecological damage is permanent. Once oxygen-depleted areas expand, once species are lost, the cost of trying to reverse the damage far outweighs any economic gains. In this case, it seems like short-term human interests are being prioritized over the long-term survival of a critical ecosystem. The Baltic Sea also plays a role in global climate regulation. It acts as a carbon sink, storing large amounts of organic material in its sediments. When oxygen levels drop and ecosystems collapse, these carbon stores can be released back into the atmosphere, contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. This is another example of how local decisions, like Denmark's, can have far-reaching global consequences. Protecting the Baltic is not just a matter of regional pride or economic interest. It's part of the broader fight against climate change. Public response to Denmark's decision has been polarized. Environmental groups are sounding alarms, calling for stricter oversight and international intervention. Scientists have published studies warning that the Baltic Sea may reach an irreversible tipping point within decades if current policies continue. On the other hand, some political leaders and industry representatives emphasize economic necessity, arguing that Denmark's approach is responsible and sustainable. The tension between economic development and environmental protection has never been more evident, and the stakes could not be higher. One of the key challenges is the transboundary nature of the Baltic Sea. Water, pollution, and marine life don't respect national borders. A decision in Denmark affects Sweden, Finland, Poland, and even the Russian coastline. This means that unilateral decisions have regional consequences, requiring diplomacy, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Unfortunately, environmental treaties can only do so much when economic priorities clash with ecological realities. Denmark's decision may test the strength and effectiveness of these international agreements in ways never seen before. The human cost of a failing Baltic Sea cannot be underestimated. Fishing communities, tourism industries, and coastal towns rely on the sea for their livelihoods. Cultural traditions tied to the water may disappear. Seafood quality may decline, creating health risks for millions of people. As oxygen-depleted zones expand, toxic algae proliferate, and fish populations decline, the economic consequences become tangible and immediate. The choice Denmark has made is not abstract. It affects real lives, communities, and traditions. There is also the psychological impact to consider. For generations, the Baltic Sea has been a source of inspiration, recreation, and identity. People swim, sail, and fish in its waters, and its beauty has shaped art, literature, and culture. As pollution spreads, water quality declines, and species disappear, the sea becomes less of a sanctuary and more of a symbol of environmental neglect. Losing the Baltic's vibrancy could have profound social and emotional consequences that are harder to quantify but no less real. Scientists stress that it's not too late, but immediate action is required. Policies must focus on reducing nutrient runoff, controlling industrial discharge, and restoring habitats. International cooperation is essential to ensure that no single country's decisions undermine regional efforts. Restoration projects like oxygenation experiments, seaweed farming, and wetland reconstruction have shown promise, yet these interventions are expensive, time-consuming, and only effective if harmful activities are halted. Denmark's current path complicates these efforts, potentially making recovery impossible. Some experts suggest that technological solutions alone cannot save the Baltic Sea. While innovative approaches like artificial oxygenation and bioremediation help, the root problem is human activity. Industrial projects, agricultural practices, and lax environmental regulations must be addressed. Otherwise, the sea may reach a tipping point beyond which technology cannot compensate. Denmark's decision, by increasing industrial activity without fully considering ecological consequences, moves the Baltic closer to this point. Public awareness and activism play a critical role. Citizens across Europe have protested, petitioned, and lobbied for stronger protections. Media coverage helps shed light on the urgency of the situation. Social pressure, combined with scientific research, has historically led to positive change. However, momentum can be fragile, and when political decisions favor short-term gains, environmental concerns are often sidelined. The fate of the Baltic Sea may hinge on how society balances immediate needs with long-term sustainability. Ultimately, the Baltic Sea represents a test of our collective responsibility. Its waters, its marine life, and its human communities are interconnected in ways that demand careful stewardship. Denmark's recent decision, while economically motivated, threatens to undo decades of conservation work. If left unchecked, the consequences could be catastrophic. Expanding dead zones, collapsing fisheries, lost biodiversity, and disrupted ecosystems. The Baltic Sea is resilient, but resilience has limits, and scientists warn that we may have already pushed it too far. As we continue to monitor this situation, it's important to understand the broader lessons. Environmental protection requires foresight, cooperation, and prioritizing long-term health over short-term profit. Decisions made by a single nation can ripple across borders, affecting millions of people and countless species. The Baltic Sea is a microcosm of global environmental challenges, delicate, interconnected, and under constant threat from human activity. How we respond now will determine whether it thrives or deteriorates irreversibly. In conclusion, the Baltic Sea has faced numerous challenges over the past century, but Denmark's decision represents a new level of risk. Oxygen depletion, habitat destruction, and chemical pollution could accelerate beyond recovery. Fisheries and communities that depend on the sea are under immediate threat, and the broader environmental consequences are severe. Scientists, environmentalists, and concerned citizens are raising the alarm, emphasizing that urgent, coordinated action is needed. Without it, the Baltic Sea as we know it may never recover. This is a wake-up call for all of us. It is a reminder that our choices, whether at the individual, national, or global level, have consequences that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings. The Baltic Sea is a treasure of biodiversity, culture, and natural beauty. Preserving it requires understanding, action, and above all, responsibility. The decisions made today will shape the future of this fragile ecosystem for generations to come.